You got it?
All right.
You know, I appreciate, thank you for the invitation. Getting invited to anything in AA is an absolute honor, but a Unity Day and a Founders Day celebration, celebrating Alcoholics Anonymous history is a special honor, and I'm humbled and I'm grateful. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this wonderful celebration today. I'm charged to tell you in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. My sobriety date is June the 13th, 1987. My home group is the Working with Others group in Angier. We meet every Monday night at 7 p.m. at the Angier Baptist Church. If you're in the area and you want to come to a good Three Legacy group, you see me after the meeting, I'll make sure you know how to get there. I have a sponsor and I am sponsored. And I've been involved in service and corrections since the beginning because I had my first sponsor who's here with me tonight, Henry. And our journey has crossed paths several times throughout my sobriety. But certainly the thing that I got from Henry was that we showed up early at functions like this. We showed up at our home group early, which as a newcomer, I didn't understand that. I thought you slid in at 8 o'clock, really right at 8 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock you tore the pavement up getting out of there. And that's not how it's done at all. You get there early, you make the coffee, you set up, you put out the ashtrays back in our days, and then after the meeting, you got to take up all them ashtrays and empty them and wash those big urns we made coffee in and put that room back better than we found it. I was told if we left the room better than we found it, we'd always have a place to meet. What a concept. But thanks for the skit. That was absolutely awesome. Thank you all for participating in that. I've been involved in general service, and Sinclair will tell you, boy, we've been through some battles, and when you get an agenda item that comes up that's controversial, we don't do anything fast in AA, I'll tell you that. It takes a while to get that through. But thank God for the points that were made here in the literature that was developed as of a need. And I think that's what everything in Alcoholics Anonymous, just like my home group, I was a solid member of a good home group for over 22 years. And I didn't really want to leave my home group to go start a group in Angier. But I'm from Angier. That's where I live. And everybody would ask me whenever I would do a talk somewhere, it says, well, you know, your home group's in Fuquay. Y'all don't have no AA in Angier? And I'm like, well, no, we don't have a group there. They've tried several times. It's kind of hard to get one to take, I think, so they haven't made it, you know. And I got tired of hearing that being asked. And out of that born the necessity, a couple of our home group members from different groups, we got together and we said, you know, Angier needs a good AA group. And I think it's our responsibility to do that. And a little over 3 years ago, we started our group in June, and it's not flourished, it's grown. We're a mighty six, but we grew up real big at first, and then it kind of waned off. And the reason it waned off was that, let me give you our format. This might explain why it kind of waned off. Our format is the first Monday of every month we study the tradition corresponding with the month. The second Monday we study the step corresponding with the month. The third Monday is a literature study. Right now we're in the big book. And the fourth Monday is an open speaker like we have here today. And the fifth Monday is a topic on history, AA history, from the chairperson's perspective. And last month was on the big book and the history of the big one. She did a great job. Corey's our current area grapevine coordinator. And she did a great job on that topic for us. But the thing I appreciate about general service is paving the way for us alcoholics to have a voice in AA. And how grateful I am that that voice has always been there, all the way back to the beginning. When you think about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I appreciate the segue that my man, more Steve, gave me, is that when you think about how close this thing almost didn't happen, it's inspirational for me to look back and know that this was a God-ordained program. I believe truly believe this with all my heart, that God reached down out of heaven and touched Bill Wilson and said we need to do something about the drinking problem in the world today. And I'm forever grateful that Bill Wilson had that blinding white light flash in the hospital for the third time on his last leg, not knowing whether he's going to make it or not, and was touched by the hand of God, and he was forever changed. And what came out of that was the thought, the idea of that we need to do something about alcoholism. We need to do something about drinking, because I'm quite sure I'm quite sure I'm not the only one laying in this bed feeling like I feel today, with my life absolutely upside down and emptied out today. I can't be the only one thinking this way and feeling this way. There's got to be more people that need and want what I so desperately seeking. And if it weren't for Ebby Thatcher coming and having the courage to walk into Bill Wilson's kitchen that day and talk to him about something that was new to him. I mean, he's only been sober a couple of months after Roland Hazard and Frank Parker show up at the court that day and talked to the judge, which was a friend of Roland Hazard's family, talked him into letting them take Ebby Thatcher, who was drunk in the backyard shooting crows because he had just painted the house and they was messing it up. And he got arrested for drunk public shooting in the town. And you know, I grew up down east, and that's a normal thing. I mean, shooting in town, I didn't know you get locked up for that. They said bird sanctuary. I thought that was suggestive. I didn't know that was the law. But you know, so that's how Ebby started out, you know, and them boys get him into the Oxford group. And thank God for the Oxford groups and the Washingtonians and the men and women that came before us to pave the way and show us what not to do. You know, show us, learn from the mistakes of others. One of the things that I always contribute to Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and the founders, who were wise enough and humble enough to let's see what the others did wrong so we don't make those same mistakes. Even though we duplicated a lot of them, it was good to have that record to look at. But the thing that for me, when I think about Roland Hazard and I think about Ebby Thatcher and Ebby going to talk to Bill in his kitchen, how close it could have been. I mean, if I'd have went to saw Bill and Bill's pushing that gin to me and it's in prohibition times and it's hard to get a drink, I might have took that drink, you know. And he didn't. He stayed the course because he had that look. Bill describes that look in his eye, and he talked about that fresh skin and he was glowing. And that's what I saw Henry. You know, when Henry approached me that night, I came limping into AA on my last leg. This is way too close to my anniversary. I've been trying to get through this talk 2 days now. It's just emotional for me, but I remember walking in there, and the name of the group was Surrender to Win. How appropriate. And I walked in that group that night, facing a felony possession with intent to distribute. They had taken my car. They had taken our money. My wife was ready to leave me. My boss was ready to fire me. My scorecard had finally read 0. I did not come in here on a winning streak. But I remember when Henry talked to me, he was calm. And he had this certain something in his eye that was different than the other men I had known that I worked in construction with at the time. And he was fresh-skinned and glowing. And so were the other people in that group. And he talked with a purpose. And I hadn't heard anybody talk with a purpose in a long time unless they were trying to get money out of me, get something else out of me, or have a drink with me. That was the only time they talked with a purpose. He talked with a purpose about a solution. And being wise that he was beyond his years, even though I was in the other fellowship, I was in an NA meeting at that time. I was so confused, I didn't even know where I needed to be. I thought I was way too hip, slick, and cool at 25 years old to go to AA. I was hoping to get to keep drinking is what that was, just to be honest. And but he shared with me and shared with me from his own heart, and he bore his soul. He did the same thing that Ebby did for Bill and Bill did for Bob, was he told his story. He shared with me from the heart what had happened to him and what he was like today as a result of that. And he took me. He didn't talk to me about it. He showed me. He took me, and he took me to my first AA meeting at his home group. And we got there early. And he integrated me into that group without me even being aware of it. I look back on it now and I know how sneaky he was. But then I just didn't know. I just was going because I didn't have anything else. I didn't have anything else to do, and I certainly didn't have any winning streak to fall back on. So whatever this man said, I wanted what he had, and I was willing to go to any length to get it. And we went to that first group. It was a Crabtree group in Raleigh, North Carolina, and met on Tuesdays and Saturday nights. And I'm forever grateful because I was the youngest guy in there by years, man. I mean, by years. And we went in there, and I thought I was in the wrong. I walked in there, and I got ahead of Henry. And I walked in there and I thought, man, this is a church meeting. This can't be an AA meeting. I come back out and Henry said, no, you're in the right place. Come on back in here. And I looked at all these people, and they looked nice, they dressed, they had nice cars. I'm like, oh, I'm definitely in the wrong place. I don't have anything. And I did have a watch. I did have a watch. That was about it. No driver's license and a watch. I was ahead of the game. Because many times before then, I didn't have a driver's license, and I didn't have a watch. I didn't have anything. But what that group did for me is that they welcomed me into the fold. And they did for me what Evie did for Bill and Bill did for Bob, was that they helped explain to me about the illness of alcoholism. They gave me a place to recover. And I remember sitting there one night, and we're talking about literature, and I'll never forget, this is always part of my story. I was sitting there one night, Henry and I are sitting there, we're like we normally do before the meeting, we're talking, and he would usually share some wisdom or something right before the meeting. And the basket's getting ready to come around, and we're waiting and going on, and he had already told me before the meeting that, there's a literature table over there, pick you up one of them big books on the way out, I'm not paying him no mind. And the basket comes by, and he stops the basket, and he says, put $5 in the basket and get you a book off that table on the way out the door. And I'm arguing with him, and I'm like, put no dollar, man. He drops his head, he'd always do, and he would pause. And he said, Tony, you'll spend $100 on a substance to kill yourself, and you ain't smart enough to spend $5 on a book to save your life. Shut up, put the $5 in the hat, and get your book off the table on the way out. And I'm just resentful while I'm pulling that $5 out and putting it out. I'm going to get him after the meeting, And that's just the kind of alcoholic I was I had to be told repeatedly sometimes before I actually got the message. But I remember getting that first big book, and I had other books that I read every morning. And I'm going to just share with you this, is that what they shared with me in that first home group was unconditional love. And what they shared with me was the importance of me passing that on to somebody else. So every time a newcomer come in that door, the old timers rarely went up to them in those days. They sent us to go talk to them because they said they could relate to me a whole lot better than they can someone with much time as they have. And that I would simply to tell them how I was staying sober, what home groups I went to, what meetings I went to. And my sponsor took me to a lot of groups and shared with me how to be a part of this fellowship. And it was, to me, was so powerful, was the fact that no matter where I went, I was welcome. Just like I was here tonight. And I've seen a lot of my friends here tonight, and I love going places and seeing everybody. And this area here certainly has a special place in my heart. I can tell you that what happened for me was that those old timers showed me what love and gratitude was. They showed me what the integrity of the program in Alcoholics Anonymous looks like. And they encouraged me to share that in a way that was from my own story and from my own heart and my own way and in my own words. And I could share that with you today. Back then I was not smart enough to pick that up. This is all in retrospect, looking back over the years at how they were able to do that in a way that was effective for me. I'm the kind of guy, I took my first drink of alcohol at 7 years of age. My first drink was a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. It was my uncle's. I was watching football with him. My cousin and I was fighting over a Pepsi bottle and a glass. Who was going to get the bottle and who was going to get that sissy glass? Neither one of us wanted it. Both of us wanted the bottle until my uncle brought in that beautiful red, white, and blue can with ice around the top of it and salt. And I lost all interest in that Pepsi Cola, and I took a big old pull as soon as I could talk him out of it. I got that can away from him, and I got as much as I could till he wrestled it away from me. And I'm going to share with you what my experience was. It was crisp, it was clean, it was refreshing, and I burped really loud. And I loved everything about that old Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. And I've talked to a lot of people in AA, and they didn't think that much about a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. The PBR is one on their top list of items to drink. But what happened for me is that I at that moment identified with one thing. I loved the taste of it. I thought it was great. I was getting the forbidden fruit. I was hanging out with my uncle from the Marine Corps, and I'm drinking beer and watching football on a Sunday afternoon. How much manly can you get, I was all for that. I wanted to be the one in the center of attention. I wanted to be the one like my uncle. I wanted to be like my heroes. And it took me a long time to get over that, to get to the point where I can just be one among many, and I can be okay just being me. Stop trying to be something I'm not. And it took me a long time. My drinking took me many places. One of the things that happened for me before I made that faithful walk in that room that night, I had several things that usually makes it in my story that certainly would qualify me. Was that I was a kid that had a really hard time telling the truth. Lying just came like breathing for me. I mean, it just came natural. Oh my God, it just came natural. I was good at making up stories, telling stories, entertaining people. I just didn't know you were supposed to tell them at the end that was a story. It wasn't the truth. I missed that piece. So I'm sitting in my AA meeting for the first time. I hear How It Works is read. And I almost couldn't believe the words that I heard read. You know, and I'm sitting there, and if they're constitutionally incapable, that they seem to be born that way, it's not their fault. And I'm paraphrasing that on purpose, is that was the first time I felt at home somewhere. I actually felt like I belonged, because all my life, people don't like liars. They don't like drinkers, and they don't like liars, and I was both. So I had a double whammy. But when I came in here and I heard that, and I knew that the warning there is that they were constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. That they were not at fault. They seemed to be born that way. Their chances were less than average. So I'm an old boy, got sober on a less than average chance. You know? And the other things it talked about for me it was important that welcoming me into AA is that it talked about the importance of the 12 steps. It talked about the importance of following this program. And my sponsor today, when I had the good privilege of being sponsored with a man that reads through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous starting in the beginning, and we read How It Works, I thought we were going to skip it, because my God, we read it at every meeting. I've been sober about 13 years when this guy started sponsoring me. And I'm thinking, we just skip that chapter, like several others. And he's like, oh no, we're going to read line for line. So he takes off reading. And when we got right above the 12 steps, we asked his care with complete abandon. And I'm just like, complete abandon. And so for the first time, I'm surrendering once again to these 12 steps. And he said, anytime we asked God, that was a prayer. And we got on our knees and we prayed that prayer before we read those 12 steps. And before I began going through that process, every time we got to a prayer in that book, it said we asked God. We stopped, we got on our knees in his office, and we prayed, and I got up, and we went back at it again. And for me, I'm just forever grateful that he took the time to do that for a guy like me, because it opened so many doors for me that before was closed. I just couldn't I could grow, but I just couldn't quite get over the hump, so to speak. And what that experience did for me was it got me over that hump. Because, see, when this guy started sponsoring me, I'd been sober about 7 years. And I'd gone through a divorce. I had worked through these things. And so I went through my divorce at 7 years. And we joined the same home group in 1994. And we were buddies up till he started sponsoring me in 2000, 2001. We were buddies up to that point. And he had watched me go through that divorce. He had watched me go through all these things and going back to school, through my work. Just my life was really changing. This program's wonderful and transforming our lives. And when I got to that point, we got married. Samantha and I got married, and we were trying. We had kids right away, and we got pregnant right away. And then we lost, about 3 months into it, we lost our first child. And I was so devastated spiritually, because I'm working with all these people. I'm doing all these things. God, why would you take my first child? Why would you do that? And I just couldn't get over it. I couldn't get beyond it. And I had seen my buddy Jerry work with my friend Todd and get him through so much. And so out of desperation, I just went to him. I said, dude, I need your help. I said, I can't get beyond this. I'm trying. I'm working with my sponsor. I'm doing everything I can. I just can't get beyond it. Do you think you could possibly take me back through the big book like you did, Todd, and help me get beyond this? And he said, yeah, Tony, I think I could do that. He said, the only time I got available was about 5:30 a.m. How does that sound? I was like, did I hear him right? Did he say 5:30 a.m.? Maybe he meant p.m. I said 5:30 a.m. He goes, yeah, 5:30 a.m. I said, I'll take it. And I drove to this guy's house. I live in Angier, he lived in Cary, and I drove about 40 minutes to his house every morning. I mean, I had to get up at 4, had to get ready. I'd drive to his house, and he would start reading out of that book for me until 5:30 to 6:30, and then we would go to work. And he did that for months. Thank God for sponsors that are committed to their sponsees, committed to the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the same way that Bill Wilson was, the way that he stayed with Dr. Bob through the summer to get him through those early months. And the same way that Lois talked about the non-alcoholics, how much that Lois and Dr. Bob's wife, Ann, had meant to those men and had nursed them through to get them to that point. And when Ann was meeting with Dr. Bob and Bill on those early mornings of that first summer in 1935 and reading to them out of the Bible, and they would sit quiet for a quiet time, and whatever came to them through the inspiration and meditation, they would go out and do it. And that's how they actually started going into the hospital. That was one of the things that came to them in that morning meditation, was to go into the hospital where Dr. Bob worked. They're sure there's drunks in there. And they called Sister Ignatia and said, hey, we want to come down there. We got a cure for alcoholism. At the time, it was a cure. And as you know, the story goes, they started going in there, and they put my buddy Bill D in there. And it's not my buddy, really. His name is Bill Dotson. He's just a distant relative. I just think it's funny that he's AA number 3. I'm like Tim Eden 3 or something. But anyway, the whole thing of that story to me was, and I read a book on her. I love the history. My sponsor certainly stuck that bug in on me. I read a book about her life and about the time that she spent each morning with those men, and what they did was absolutely inspirational. But to me, it was a point to where that they were being divinely led to do something none of them knew how to do. And they were breaking new ground. They were going into the hospital and they were working with people. And as you know, the first couple didn't make it, and then old Bill D made it. AA number 3 finally came into the fold, a lawyer that came in the hardest way you could in a political rally, and coming out of it a loser, but yet he stayed sober, and he come on to become AA number 3, Bill Dotson. And my sponsor, when he took me through that book, and I got over that personal, I guess the lack of a better word was, I was hurt and I was offended that I thought God had wronged me some way. And my sponsor looked at me one morning, and we were talking about this at length, and he looked at me one morning and he said, Tony, just like Henry had done several times, he said, Tony, he said, God might have been saving you some heartache. He said, what if that child would have been born and then died after they'd been born? How much harder would that have been on you? Or maybe the child would have been born with some sort of a defect, and you would be taking care of that child the rest of their lives, and it wouldn't be the normal child that you'd hoped for or prayed for. We never know. We can't question what God's will is, that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and that I just have to trust Him. And that's beginning that process of re-trusting God again and walking through that path again and having that spiritual experience one more time in AA that got me over that hurdle. The thing that I love about what Ann did for Dr. Bob and Bill was she stayed with them. And she saw them through those first months before Bill went back to New York. And the things that happened after that, when you look at Clarence Snyder was a big part of Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't hear his name a lot. Clarence was a guy that Dr. Bob sponsored. And Clarence was he was one of those early AAs, and this is just too spiritual not to be spiritual. So guess who talks to Clarence Snyder when he has hitchhiked on a truck because his wife threw him out of home there in Cleveland, Ohio. He's hitchhiked on a truck going to New York to work on the docks because there was work there, and he had some kind of relative there. I don't know if it was her brother-in-law or what, but he was going up there to do that, and he ends up not making it because he can't stay sober, and he ends up in Bill Wilson's brother-in-law, the doctor's from, gets in his office somehow. He sends him back to Cleveland with instructions to go see Dr. Bob in Akron. And so he comes back and he's talking to his wife, and she's like, I'm not having no part of this, He said, Clarence Snyder's wife said, I'm not having no part of this. And he said, honey, just give me one more chance. She said, you can stay tonight, but you got to go in the morning. You ain't coming. I've just been hurt too much. I just can't do this anymore. And they got him down to Akron, Ohio, and Dr. Bob got him in the hospital and treated him. And now this old guy here, he was funny. He was one of the guys that you hear about in the big book that went to the Oxford groups in Akron at Clarice and T. Henry's home, that big home that was open to the Oxford groupers in Akron, Ohio. And he was in there, and he's the one that was looking around at all the trinkets, thinking what he could stick in his pockets, what he could steal, because Clarence was a thief, and he just going to get what he could out of the deal, But he's the one that got upstairs on his knees, and they took what's equivalent of a third-step prayer with this guy. And they got his wife in the kitchen with the other women there, and they got her aside, and they were talking about what their husbands had been through, and how that maybe her husband could experience the same thing. So he comes in through the Oxford groups into the Alcoholics Anonymous, what was later become Alcoholics Anonymous in Akron, Ohio. And he went on to start, he left Akron on got in a fight with Dr. Bob, his sponsor, because he wanted to leave the group there, and they didn't really want him to. And he said, look, I'm sponsoring 2 guys that are Roman Catholics. That their priests are banging them in the head that they're coming out here to this Protestant organization to come to a Protestant meeting, and they're Catholic. They want them to not do that anymore, So he went back and he took a mimeograph copy of the first printing of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and he went to Cleveland and essentially started what was Alcoholics Anonymous. He titled it after the title of the book, and he started going out. And he got a little garage that he could rent. He worked for a Ford Mercury Lincoln dealership because he got sober and his life changed. He got better. And he had a Ford and a Mercury available to him, and he had some sponsees now. And he went in that little basement garage apartment, and he set up what was equivalent of an intergroup office. And he started taking and going out and getting all these people that were calling for help. And he was sending his sponsees out to go get them and bring them into the fold. And they were starting what became Alcoholics Anonymous. And the only reason he wasn't a tri-founder was he absolutely resented Bill Wilson for the worst. He just could not get along. Loved Dr. Bob to death. He was at the meeting with John D. Rockefeller when Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson was speaking, and Bill Wilson took all of Dr. Bob's time, and he only got a few minutes. And he was just livid over that. He just thought Bill Wilson was a showboater. But old Clarence Snyder, he was one of those guys in AA that was in the fold that you don't hear a lot about. And I did a little research and history on him, and it's quite funny. He had quite the life. He did manage to stay sober. He wasn't like Ebby. I think Ebby managed to put together about 2 years at best, and he was in and out. And at the end of his life, Lois and Bill Wilson took care of him in a rest home and saw him through. And that's sponsorship. That's love. That's unconditional love. And what a guy like me, when I came in Alcoholics Anonymous, there were so many things that, for me, had just didn't end well. And I was in my school years, in my community college years in Greenville, North Carolina. I had managed to graduate high school. My drinking was really picking up now because I was away from that parental domination. I didn't have anybody telling me how much I could drink. I didn't have to sober up to go home to face my parents. I could drink at will as much and often as I wanted to, and I did. And it didn't always end well for me because I'm the guy that Dr. Silkworth talks about, that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. But even though I like it, even though this stuff is injurious, it's causing me some problems. I can't see the truth for the false. I can't get over the fact that I can't drink successfully because I want to dearly, but I can't. And every little time I would drink successfully, I would hone in on that, and I would forget all those other times, the drunk driving tickets, the messes I kept getting into, the misadventures, the near-death experience in wrecking cars and things. And what happened for me this Saturday was I started drinking, and I was one of those guys that set up things like we all do. I said, if I ever drink alone, I'm probably an alcoholic, I might want to quit or something, And so I started out drinking that morning. There was a bunch of us there, and we're drinking generic beers. A little white can had beer wrote in blue letters. It was $1 and something a 6-pack at the A&P store in Greenville, and we pulled our resources and took all the food out of the refrigerator and just filled it with this beer. And we started drinking that Saturday morning. We were going to go to a football game at ECU. We had the day planned out. Somewhere in the afternoon, I phased out. I don't know why I go. I don't think it was a blackout. I think I was conscious, according to the stories. I was just kind of phased out. But something happened in there, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there and the music comes back on. I'm sure it was going the whole way. I just kind of came back to, and the music's going, and I look around, the room's empty. And I'm still drinking. I said, that's not a good thing. I got to get out of here. I need to find somebody to drink with. I don't want to drink alone. Might be an alcoholic. So I take off and go downtown Greenville to drink with my friends. I go down there to the little pub down there, or little bar down there called Pantana Bob's. And it was a foosball joint. I loved to play foosball back then. I go in there playing foosball and drinking long neck Budweiser because I'm winning, they're losing. The deal is, it's just like pool. You put up your money, you play the winner. If you lose, you buy the winner a beer. That's just how it goes. I was drinking lots of free beer that night. I was drinking the good beer. I was drinking them long neck Budweisers, no more of that canned cheap stuff. And I was just drinking and talking smack and winning and having a good time. And alcohol, as it often does, it turns on me. And the next thing I know, I have one of these phenomenons that follow me throughout my drinking was I started getting hot. It's just getting flushed, sweating. I got drunk enough to lose. I finally got off that foosball table. I went outside to cool down. And the next thing I know, I'm coming to, and I'm hearing voices, and I'm going, man, this just can't be good. And I hear this young couple, and they were so sweet. Thank God that he sent them through that alley that night. I'm in an alley behind the bar between that and a little sandwich shop, and somehow or another I had made my way in that alley. I have no idea. But I know I came to listening to those people talking about me. And they wanted to know what they needed to do about me. Should they call an ambulance? Because they've been trying to wake me up for some time now, and I'm not responsive. And I finally came to, and they was much relieved. God bless them. They were so relieved, and I was so, oh man, I've never felt so remorseful, so guilty, so shameful, so absolutely god-awful. Those hideous four horsemen, terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. You know, drinkers will recognize this when they read it, as Bill Wilson put it, and I certainly recognize those voices and how clean that young Christian couple was and how heartfelt they were at watching over me in my moment of need and seeing me through that embarrassing moment. And I didn't have a shirt on, I didn't have any shoes, they had taken the stuff out of my pockets. My stuff was strode out in the alley with the other paper and leaves in there, and they were helping me gather my stuff up, and I was just, thank God they didn't take my pants. You know, I got some clothes on, and I get my stuff, and I'm thanking them, and I get to my car, and I had to drink real hard the next day to push that memory as far back in my mind, hoping it would never see the light of day again. And I just had so many of those experiences, one right behind the other, but I just couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't find the desire to stop drinking. It was many years later before I staggered into that room on a last-ditch effort. I went out drinking and finally managed to get my driver's license back, got out of my hometown, and made it out of Plymouth, made it to Raleigh, North Carolina, and got a job there with an electrical contractor. I've been working for at the paper mill. When they moved, they told me they had a job for me, so I took it, and I went out, come to Raleigh. And my drinking was progressing pretty good, and I had a girlfriend who was becoming my fiance back in Plymouth, and we were doing the long-distance relationship, and I come in one weekend, and all the guys up there, you know, they've got beer joints, and they've got bars where the girls don't wear clothes on top, and they were all going out to those, and they didn't have them in Washington County, didn't have them in Pitt County at the time that I knew of anyway. So I want in Rome, you're going to do like the Romans do, and I'm going to go out with these boys, and I go out with these boys, and we're having a big time, and I come in, and my roommate had written a note on the refrigerator that Janice had called, and I thought, oh my God. So I get on, I said, did y'all tell them I was here? Because I'm supposed to be working out of town, you know, them lies we tell, you know, and he's like, yeah, I didn't know you were supposed to not be here. You didn't tell me. I'm like, oh God. So I get on the phone, and I'm talking to her, and I'm begging her, you know, and we do as we do. We're sweet talking, and we come up with this plan, you know, and she says, honey, I love you. She says, I don't mind you drinking. It's just that line about you drinking and stuff. I said, well, baby, we can do something about the line. She said, yeah, we need to do something about that line. So I go see a psychiatrist on how not to lie to my girlfriend about my drinking. Honest to God's truth. You can't make this stuff up, folks. So I go to Wake County Mental Health because I got some buddies at work. So Larry, Moe, and Curly, we got together and came up with a plan on how I can get better about not lying to my wife about my drinking. You go over there to the mental health center. They don't charge much because you don't make much. You get to see the psychologist. Maybe if you're real tough, you can get to see the psychiatrist, you know. That's not a good thing, by the way, y'all. So I get in there, and there's a questionnaire. And I'm going through this questionnaire, and it's a check yes and check no now. They left me way too much space between them lines. So y'all can imagine, I'm in here, and this little psychologist has gotten some information, and she gives me that questionnaire. They just want to see where I'm at. So I'm reading, and it's like, has your drinking ever caused you a problem at home? Has your drinking ever caused you a problem at school? Has your drinking ever caused you a problem at work? You know, were you drinking when you really didn't want to drink, but you find yourself drinking anyway? And I'm like, what has this got to do? So I'm answering them, did you use any controlled substances and all this stuff? And they went through all these questions, and I'm doing the best I can, and I'm writing. And this little girl is looking at me like, what is he writing? It's a check the box, dude. Just go through this thing. Like, 12 questions, folks. It couldn't have took more than 5 minutes for somebody else to just mow right through that. I'm over here flipping it over. I'm writing in the margin, and she's just like, stop. You know, the only thing I answered for sure, honestly, on that thing was, I never drank while pregnant. That's the only thing I know for sure I answered honestly. Because the rest of it, I was justifying why I drank and how I drank. That was what I was doing. And she takes me right in to see the psychiatrist, which is not a promotion like I thought it was. That's not a good thing. So I get in the psychiatrist, and she's going through these questions with me. And she doesn't take her long at all to figure this out. She figured it out about as fast as Henry did. This old boy's an alcoholic. He clearly needs to be in AA. So she starts writing on this card. And she's handing me this card, and I'm thinking with my alcoholic pride and ego that I'm going into a private practice. I don't have to come to this mental health center no more where they're picking stuff out of the air that's not there. I'm in, I'm in the high chair. I'm got it. And she was smiling, which made me think I was in even more. And I took that card, and it said Drug Action, Awake County, and a telephone number. And it said Alcoholics Anonymous and a telephone number. And I'm thoroughly confused at this point. And she smiles real pretty. She says, Mr. Dotson, you call those numbers, and after you've been sober for a year, you come back and see me, and we'll see if we can't help you with that dishonesty problem you got. Oh, I was so mad. I went to my first meeting to prove that old gal wrong, and as I stand before you today, I'm so grateful that she was able to tell me what I need to hear instead of what I wanted to hear, which was how to stop lying. She taught me exactly how to stop lying. You go to AA and get sober and you get honest, because if you want to stay sober, you're going to have to be honest. That fearless and thorough and searching inventory that came after that. And I'll tell you is that I got to that apartment in Raleigh, and we were, my roommates and I, we had built a bar in the corner of our apartment. We were having such a wonderful time with that thing, and I had framed it in. I had almost ready to finish it, and I knew I was just how we are, resentment, I'm thinking all day, I got to go home, finish that thing. I know them two yo-yos, my roommates, they can't figure out how to drive a nail. I'm going to go home and finish this thing out after I worked hard all day. And they've been over to NC State. They were students at NC State. I was the roommate. I was the working kid. They were the college boys. And I said, I got to go and finish this thing out. I walked in the door, and not only had they finished it, they hung my wooden Pabst Blue Ribbon, beautiful big old sign I had took from the beer joint that I was so proud. That was one of the things that I kept. Lost a lot of things in my drinking, but there's a few things I had on to. They had already hung it for me. Man, we had a bottle of George Dickel. I was so happy. I come in the door, it just changed my whole attitude. You know how it does. We come to a meeting, it just changed the whole attitude. We started drinking that Saturday at our new bar, and I lost them because I would drink them out. They'd leave because they just can't keep up. They got to go. They're like, man, I need a break from that cat. They got to go. And they left me. Phone rings, and it's a friend of theirs. She was a little cheerleader over at NC State, and she calls, and she can hardly catch a breath. She's crying so hard. and I got her to calm down. I said, honey, what's wrong? She said, my boyfriend left me. And I said, you need some company? She said, yeah. I said, me and George will be right over. We're good at fixing broken hearts. And I'm going over there, and I got a mission, boy. I got that fifth, about that much left in that fifth, and I'm going over to fix that broken heart. And somewhere between there, I ran into this big party that had spilled out of the apartments. They had opened the doors, and it's like 4 apartments into one big area. And I hit that, and I thought, this is great. I can get pumped up. I'll get some stuff. I'll go over there, and me and her are just going to forget about that other boy altogether and just make her forget all about that broken heart. And I'm coming to, and I'm in an area, the lights are a lot brighter than that, and the whole room was white, and I'm butt naked, and I'm on a gurney, and I got a sheet on me, and it's cold. And my throat is killing me, my head is killing me, I got IVs in me, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm trying to figure out, am I dead? Is this purgatory? Where am I at? What's going on? And the little nurse comes in, and I look at her, and she looks at me, and she says, oh, you're back with us. And I'm like, where'd I go? Where am I? Where am I, number one? Am I in Wake County? Am I at the hospital right next to the apartment complex, or am I somewhere else? And the story begins to come out, and this is all hearsay, but the ambulance driver, because I have no idea, y'all. I could have went to Japan. I don't know. But what happened for me is that the ambulance driver told the story that the people who found me in the condition I was in had shared with the nurse, and the nurse shared it with me. And evidently, at some point in time, it began to rain, and all I remember was I was getting that hot flash. I was sweating. I was not feeling real good, and I needed to go outside and get some air because it was hot in there. And I went outside to get some air, and the next thing I know, I come to in that hospital. And what had happened was that it began to rain, and from what I understand is a low area and there's a storm drain. And somehow or another, I ended up in this area, and the water's going in, and I'm going down. I'm not coming up, and somebody finds me, and they pull me out, and they call an ambulance because I'm unresponsive. And I wasn't unresponsive because I drowned. I was unresponsive because I was so drunk. I was in a complete blackout and just passed out cold. And I've been drinking all day. I've been drinking liquor all day. I was done. And when they got me in that hospital, they started checking me, and they immediately pumped my stomach out. That's why I was feeling so bad. My throat was hurting. IV Solutions was giving me fluids to try to purge because I was in alcoholic poisoning. She said that, we tried hard. She said, well, what time did I get here? Because it's like midnight almost now at this point. They brought you in about 5 o'clock. and I'm just coming to now, and I'm thinking, man, that was bad. She said, yeah, there's a Raleigh police officer right outside. He wants to talk to you about the stuff that was in your pocket. And I'm looking at my clothes, and there's a puddle of water on the floor, and I'm going, that just couldn't have ended well at all right there. And I don't even want to talk to that Raleigh PD. So she leaves, and I get up, put them wet clothes on, and I sneak out of the hospital. I get out of there, dude. I'm not sticking around for any of that. And you know, it took me beyond that. It took me all the way up to that point where I was at that meeting with Henry that night on that Surrender to Win. It took multiple times like that to get me to that point. And one of the things that happened for me, I was about 3 months sober, and I'd never been sober that long before. I'd never been without a drink that long since I was 15 years old. I was 25, so about 10 years. I'd never been that long without a drink, ever, for any reason. And I started coming unglued. I mean, I was having days where I didn't know which end was up. I was getting confused. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. We were going to meetings. We were talking about the steps. We were talking about this other stuff, but I wasn't really doing anything. And I came home from work that day, and I was restless, irritable, and discontent. The only thing I knew would make me feel better, would feel that hole in my chest the wind was blowing through, and that god-awful feeling in my gut, was a drink of liquor. I could smell bourbon. I could taste bourbon. I wanted to drink a liquor. That's it. I'm going to get me one. I'm done with all this AA mess. If this is the best I'm going to feel by going to AA, I'm done with all this nonsense. And there's a stupid little saying in AA in the 80s was the time to call your sponsors before you drink, not after. This saying's rattling around in my head, and I'm like, man, I got a drink calling over here, and I got that over here, and I'm like, fine. He's young. He's not going to be home. I'm going to call. I'm going to get drunk. It's his fault because he won't home. So I call, and that joker picks up like on the first ring, and I'm just like, man, he talks me off that ledge. Just the calmness in our sponsor's voice. I just love that. He was so calm. He talked me off that ledge. He talked me to his house. We got to his house, and he took me through what I would say would be the equivalent of the first 3 steps. And what he did for me was we went back through all those misadventures in my drinking life to help me to fully concede my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. I could stop questioning that fact just from the condition I was in that day. By the time I left his house that day and we had prayed and we had talked, because he talked to me about God and he said, where do you stand with God? You know, and I already surrendered. I'm just like the book talks about. Once you surrender at that point and we've agreed that we're completely powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable, I got nowhere else to turn. I don't have any power. I need power. I don't have power. You know, the big book talks about, in We Agnostics, about that lack of power was our dilemma. You know, we had to find a power by which we could live, obviously. But where and how we find that power was in this book. And I didn't understand that, but I understood what he told me. He asked me a question. He says, well, where do you stand with God, Tony? And I dropped my head and I said, man, I just don't think that God wants anything to do with me. I said, I think I've done too many dirty, rotten things. I've got too many black marks beside my name for God to want anything to do with me. And then he drops his head, as he often did. And he said, I don't understand how you can think that when everything we just went through, all the near-death experiences, the wrecked cars, all the things you went through, how could you possibly think God didn't want anything to do with you when he clearly has saved you to the point to where you and I can sit here and talk about this today? How do you think you got here today without drinking today? All that had to have been God. You couldn't have done that by yourself. And the culmination of that was he grabbed my hands, which I wasn't real big on holding men's hands, you know, and it just caught me off guard. He's just like, you know, trust me. And we prayed that prayer, and I left his house that day. And in the 3rd step, it talks about that when we pray that prayer, voicing it without reservation, sometimes an effect, a very great one, was felt at once. And what happened for this old boy was when I left his house that day, that overwhelming obsession and compulsion to drink was gone and has never returned since that day. He relieved me of the bondage of self. He relieved me of that obsession to drink. I was put on solid ground. And from that point on, all I had to do was write a 4th step. And I had to have the courage to sit down with this man and tell him my story and gave him my 5th step. And the first thing he asked me for, and I don't know if y'all have done a 5th step yet or not, but let me tell you what these sneaky sponsors will do for you. They're going to ask you for the stuff you didn't even bother to write down. They're going to want that first. Honest to God, that's the first thing he asked me for. And I'm like, how do you know that? Y'all learned that in sponsor school or something? How do y'all know to ask these questions? And so I get through these questions with him, and he wants to know the worst one first. He said, Tony, the others will come easy. I gave him the first one, the one that I've been carrying around for years. My God, I've been carrying that thing around for years. And I was so ashamed and guilty and remorseful and just absolutely disgusted with myself. And he looks at me and he's, Tony, that's pretty common. I'm thinking, yep, I'm going to be walking home because I'm riding with him. He's going to put me out right here. We're out like in the middle of 42 highway going to the lake, to his lake place. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to be walking home. We get through getting the gas. I get back in this truck at that time, and we're going to the lake, and we're going to do my fifth step out there. And we're starting on the ride there. And he explains to me what common meant was pretty normal. And he shared something very similar with me. And once again, just like when I heard them read that first time I heard how it worked read, and they were talking about how we're going to be okay being a liar in AA. We're going to be okay being a drunk in AA. For the first time I learned that all these things, these dirty, rotten things I had carried around all my life, that I'm going to be okay regardless of what they are or who I am or how I got there or what they all meant. And when I got through taking that fifth step with him, and I was walking on air. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I was 25 years old, and that was the first time I've been completely honest with another human being about everything, and the first time in my life. And it was freeing. And I went back home, and I got quiet for an hour like our book talks about, and I asked God to let me be free of that stuff. And about the next 2 weeks, my character defects beat me to death. I'm just going to tell you, I was rudely aware of every defect in the character I got, and I understand why the sixth step is so important. Is to help me be willing to truly let them go, and I did. And what that did for me was the same thing that if you think about sponsorship, you think about what Dr. Bob went through when Bill Wilson was there, and the two of them were figuring all this thing out. What I'm grateful for was they had the courage to see it through. You know, my sponsor talks about commitments, and he's certainly a commitment sponsor, and all my sponsors have been, but this guy here, he's a phenomenon. I just don't know how he gets everything done. He gets done, but he does it. And that's what I look back at the history of AA, and I look at all the people that did what needed to be done, just like today. The people that showed up early here to set up this hall, the guys that are out there cooking the hot dogs and hamburgers, all these wonderful desserts, the people that put on the skit. Everything that happened today was because of a commitment. People honored their commitments. They came here, they did what was necessary for us to come here and have this wonderful celebration that we're having today. I'm going to tell you is that I stayed continuously sober since June the 13th, 1987 by God's grace and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and good sponsorship. My current sponsor had taken me through that big book like I talked about every morning at 5:30 in the morning. When we finished, we went through the traditions in the 12 and 12. When we finished that, we started reading through, and this is a hard read, y'all. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, if you've never read AA Comes of Age, Alcoholics Anonymous, if you want to learn about the history of AA, that's the book will get the job done. They start out with a few things in the very beginning of this book. And they talk about the dates, the historical dates, the landmarks in AA history. And certainly they're looking at the summer of 1934 when Silkworth tells Bill that he's a hopeless alcoholic. They go on to talk about in August that the Oxford groups sober up Ebbie T. and that he goes on. And that was in August of 34. In 34, in November, Ebbie visits Bill, and in 1934, in December, Bill's spiritual experience in Towns Hospital, and in December 1934 was Bill's last drink. He was sober from that day forward. In May of 1935 was when he visited for the first time. He went over to Henrietta Seiberling's cottage on the Seiberling's estate there in Akron after he had been in the Mayflower Hotel where he was there on business. As we all know, Bill was a stockbroker, so he had gone there on a proxy fight for a company they were trying to take over. And if Bill won, he'd been set financially, he'd have been the president of that company. He'd have had it made on Easy Street. Things didn't work out for Bill. As you know, he's in that Mayflower Hotel. He's broke. You don't know how he's going to pay his bill. He's just trying to get through a weekend. He don't know how he's going to do it. And he decides for some reason he's in that church, and he's in that hallway there, and that church directory is calling his name, and he goes through and he's looking at these names, and he's been in the bar, and there's a gay crowd inside. He talks about a happy crowd, a crowd that is enjoying themselves and enjoying alcohol. And he's thinking, man, if I go in there, I might get a companion for the weekend, make this weekend go a lot better than it is. But he also knew he might drink in there, and that scared him right out of that bar with those nickels and dimes. He had to go to that payphone in that hallway there in the Mayflower Hotel. And he's going through that church directory, and he sees a guy named Tunks. That sounds like drunk, so he's going to call this Tunks guy and try to figure out what's going on. And so he calls him to see if he knows anything about any drunks. He said, well, I don't know anything about any drunks, but I know some people that might. He said, give this person a call. So he gave him a list. So Bill went through and called and got down to the last one was Henrietta Seiberling. She said, yes, I think I do. I have somebody you can talk to. You come over to my cottage. And so he went over to this state, and he got there, and they talked. And of course, as we know, it was Mother's Day, and Dr. Bob had come in drunk, had the potted plant. He was potted on the floor next to it, as we know the story. And so he comes the next day, and he made him promise, just 15 minutes, no more than that. And Ann said, okay, no more than 15 minutes. And he gets in there and he tells Bill the first thing, 15 minutes, all you got, old boy, make it good. And as we know, they talked to somewhere around 11 p.m. that night, I think. So that's 5 or 6 hours that they talked. Because the first time in Dr. Bob's life, someone had shared with him from the heart about how he got sober. And he talked to him about alcoholism, and in the way that Silkworth impressed it upon Bill was that it was a hopeless illness of mind, body, and spirit. And he had told him things that even though Dr. Bob was a member of the Oxford group and had been studying things for a year and a half, hard about spiritual things, trying to stay sober, and just couldn't put it together, that he got some hope from this guy. He got hope from that message of hope that came from him. And just like I did from my sponsor, I got hope that maybe, just maybe, I can get through this spiritual dilemma I'm in, and I can come out the other side of this thing, and I'll be okay. And what happened for me, just like it did for Dr. Bob, was my life changed in ways I hadn't even thought about. When I went back to school, when I finished, I met my wife-to-be, and we were study buddies for like almost a year, maybe a little longer. We were just friends. We met. We were in a calculus class together. We were getting our butts kicked. We had a Chinese guy was the first instructor, and he was really good. His name was Sam Chung. So he's not I can't say his name, but he was a great IBMer that knew calculus forwards and backwards, and he could explain it in a way that even an old boy like me could understand it. And she had a lot of algebra, and I was just finishing algebra. So she had been informed. She'd been in calculus when she was in college at Peace College. So between the two of us, we were getting this thing done, and he's putting that stuff on the board. But how I met my wife was the first day in class. We walk in there, and I'm sitting there, and all the other kids, like we're doing, we're looking around, checking everybody out. She comes in, she's focused. She sits down. She got a nice outfit on. Her hair's done. She is focused. She is solid, rock solid. She sits down. She looks at the board, and I'm sitting there going, one of these old boys is going to pick that up. If I want anything to do with her, I need to move fast. So I just got my book, and I saw she didn't have one, so I slid over and I said, would you like to share my book? And she's like, oh, yes, please. And so we sit down, I'm sharing the book. Well, class gets over and we leave, and I'm thinking, well, I got tomorrow. We procrastinate. I got tomorrow. I'll get some information from her tomorrow. Well, I come back to school the next Thursday night, man, and they've canceled the class for lack of participation. Not enough people signed up. And I'm thinking, oh, man, I should have got her number, So a whole semester goes by. I go take physics. She goes takes marketing. We come back into this thing. And next day, here we are, right back again. She's got no book. I said, we've been through this before. I sat down and I shared my book. But before she left that day, I said, I travel with my job sometimes. I might need some help with this homework stuff. Do you think it'd be all right if I got your telephone number so that we could keep up? I could get homework assignments in case I can't make it to class. She's like, yeah. She's smarter than I was. We put all that down anyway. Long story short, we ended up getting married in 2000, and our daughter Brooke was born in 2003. And I'm at a job, and Henry's going to laugh about this. I'm at a job. I called Henry. I got laid off. I knew that I was going to lose that job I told you about. I knew that was going to happen. It was inevitable. It did. Still didn't feel too good. They was chickens. They fired everybody else. They laid everybody else that. It was during the downturn in the economy. See, I took it personally. It was a downturn in the economy. Most of the guys got laid off that Friday. I still had their company truck with all their material and stuff on it. They waited to get me there with their truck before they laid me off on Monday. Reputation preceded me. Get that old boy in here. Don't let him take advantage of that. So anyway, what happened? What happened for me was I had a sponsor and I had a home group. And even though I had a surrounding problem that I didn't really see an immediate solution to, just like every time in AA God shows up, I called Henry, I called my sponsor, and I said, I got laid off this morning. He said, well, we're having lunch down here by the shop. Come on down and have lunch with us. I can't figure out how me going down there without a job now, I'm going to go spend $8 on lunch that I don't have, that I don't need to be spending on lunch, and he wants me to drive all the way to Raleigh with gas I'm not going to have, and I can figure out all these reasons why I don't need to go have lunch with this guy. And he said, Tony, just come have lunch with me. I said, okay. So I go down there and I have lunch with him, and of course I don't understand, never did, and we're sitting there at lunch, and I got 2 job offers at lunch. And I'm like, well, God, that's kind of neat, And so we go on, and I get home that afternoon, and the company that I had been doing construction work for, the guy's calling me. And I missed the call, and I'm like, well, I call him back, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? He says, well, I called the office, and they told me you no longer work there, but they wouldn't give me your number. He says, I had to look it up, but I got it. He said, are you available? He says, I need an electrician. I need one for about 3 weeks. He said, let me clear it with the engineering manager. He said, I can bring you in with floor engineering for a couple of weeks, get this stuff done. And I said, yes. Oh, yes, that's exactly what I need. And so from Monday, I went to work Wednesday morning for $2 more an hour, and they gave me 3 weeks worth of work. And that's been this October 2nd of '89 will be 30 years with the company and 33 years on a 3-week job. And they hired me when I was 30 days sober. God bless them. Man, they got some tenacity. They held in there. But I'm forever grateful that they did. And the way that I want to frame this in is that no matter where life took me, no matter where my drinking took me, God seemed to show up. And through Alcoholics Anonymous and people in Alcoholics Anonymous, they were able to show me the way, just like the old timers were, just like the history of Alcoholics Anonymous that you look in here. There is a ton of it in there, wonderful stories. I don't take up too much space with that, but what I want to talk to you about is whenever I think about a Unity Day, and I think about, of course, there's, when we think about unity, unity is our second legacy, and unity, service, and recovery. So this is where in page 79 in AA Comes of Age, and I'm just going to read something briefly. I got a couple things and I'm going to close this up so we can eat. Unity, the second legacy. Today we in AA are together, and we know we're going to stay together. We are at peace with each other and with the world around us. So many of our conflicts are resolved, and that our destiny seems to be secure. The problems of yesterday have produced the blessings of today. And certainly, as you heard the way my story went, that was it for me. I mean, our problems of yesterday has become the solution today. I have experience that I can share with a newcomer of all the hopeless things that I went through. I can certainly help them through most of theirs. The other thing I always think about unity is we can't help but think of the second tradition, and I always tradition one. Excuse me. See, there goes my flunder. So our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Being a unity day, we think about the unity of Alcoholics Anonymous is the best and the most cherished quality our society has. Our lives and the lives of all those to come depend squarely upon it. We stay whole or AA dies. Without unity, the heartbeat of AA would cease to beat. Our world arteries would no longer carry the life-giving grace of God. His gift to us would be spent aimlessly. Back again in their caves, alcoholics would reproach us and say, what a great thing AA might have been. And the thing we always love about celebrations and anniversaries, anniversary is the annual recurring date of past or current, especially events of historical, national, or personal importance. When we think about Alcoholics Anonymous, it was not only a historical event. The solution to alcoholism had come to town. It was not only a national event, was that we're on the President's Council of Alcoholism. Marty Mann was on the council for the President of Alcoholism. So we had a national solution to the problem of alcoholism. The President of the United States sent a message during the first international convention held in Cleveland about what had happened for AA and how grateful he was for the solution and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we have a historical event, we have a national event, and finally we have a personal event, our own personal stories of how the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And thank God for June 10th, 1935. Thank God for June 10th tomorrow, 2019, 84 years. An anniversary, the annual reoccurring date of past or current, and a celebration commemorating such a date, such as June 10th, 1935, like what we're all enjoying here today. The things of Alcoholics Anonymous has given me gifts that I never even knew were possible. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life that I never dreamed of. Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a relationship with a God that I never knew I could have. Today my life looks like this. I have a wife today, the same wife that I've been married to. This October will be 19 years. My daughter's 15 years old. I've already told you I'm in the same job. I've been promoted. I've had opportunities far beyond anything that should have ever been given me. I have a home group. I have friends in AA, and I have family that absolutely allows me to do whatever's necessary in Narcotics Anonymous. I don't get any grief from my wife when I go to give a talk or anything like that. Her unselfishness and her commitment to my sobriety and to this program, Narcotics Anonymous, is not only inspiring, but it's honorable because of what she does to give of herself to allow me to go do the things I need to do so that I can be here today and share with you. The way that I close this is a prayer that I say each morning, and it's off of page 86, and the prayer is kind of a combination of some of those, but it talks about on awakening. We think about the 24 hours ahead. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially that our thinking be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. It goes on to say that we close this moment of meditation and prayer with a prayer that will be shown all through the day what our next steps are to be. That we be given whatever it is we need to take care of any problems today. And that we especially ask for the freedom from self-will. And that we not ask for things that are selfish or self-centered. And it tells me that if I'm willing to do these things, that I'll be given all I need for the power of that day, not to take a drink, but where I can have a happy and purposeful life. Thank you very much.